growing Nepenthes seeds. Now, there are carnivorous plants like Drosera or sundews that will actually self-pollinate or reproduce. Now, you can also, with Dionaea or flytraps, you can actually put the two flowers together on the same plant and create seeds. I've done that and propagate them that way. With Nepenthes, however, you have to have a male and you have to have a female. And unfortunately, in the Nepenthes world, there are a lot more men than there are women. So it's very, very difficult. That's why a lot of times you see in my videos that I buy large quantities of plants, large for my stance, different quantities of plants. I am hoping not only for some biodiversity, but I'm also hoping to get that elusive female so that I can propagate the plants. Now, not all hope is lost. Let's say you have a female and don't have a male. There are a lot of people out there. There's Facebook, there's the International Carnivorous Plant Society, where you can actually get pollen from other donors and then pollinate them and help to try to make other plants of your own. Now, if you happen to be lucky and have a female and a male grow at the same time and flower at the same time, then you can simply pollinate that, and whenever that happens, I will make a video on that. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that will show you how to do that if you're to that point. But essentially, you would take a Q-tip, take the pollen off of one, put it on the other, and voila. If it takes, you'll have nice big fat pods that will grow over time, and they will sprout seeds. Now, let's talk about the seeds. The seeds are extremely tiny. So they're like little tiny hairs. And if you think about it, it looks like a little tiny fiber or a little hair. And in that fiber, you'll see it goes a line and there's a bump right in the middle. That is the embryo. The larger that bump, the more viable the seed. Now, the idea with these seeds are the moment the pod splits, you want to go ahead and get those planted. I happen to buy these from Carnivorous, so they've been sitting around since March, which means that the germination rate or the strike rate won't be nearly as high, but I'm still hoping for some success. Now, what I did today is I bought 5 rounds, so I bought 5 different hybrids, and you get about, depending on the species, anywhere as low as 10 seeds to 50 and up. Again, they are very, very tiny, and so I went ahead and bought a round of 5 this time. I have another round of 13 hybrids on the way. This is going to be a big experiment that we're going to grow them, and you're going to follow along on the journey with me. The hope is obviously to get that biodiversity, but also I'm hoping as these plants grow, I'll have a larger stock that I can start doing giveaways for you, the subscribers, so that you can experience these wonderful plants too. Now, let's get down to what I did. So I'm going to very carefully try to pick this up. In here are tiny seeds. Now, where I got these from Amazon. You get 20 of them for $16. You can't beat that deal. And these are seed trays made for your common plants, but they'll work just fine for carnivorous plants. What you want to do is you want to fill the tray up. They come in little individual stacks. You want to fill that stack up with just pure sphagnum moss. Just plain long fiber sphagnum moss. Pile it in there nice and thick. Make sure you don't leave a lot of air holes. On the very top surface, you want what's called a finely milled sphagnum moss. Sounds fancy, but it's all about legwork. So what you're going to do is take long fiber sphagnum moss. You're going to chop it real thin with some pair of scissors, and you're going to place that on top. The reason why you do that is it provides more of a smooth, less porous surface, so your seeds don't fall through and get smothered by the moss. Very important. Sterilization is very, very important. So what you can do is you take this moss and you want to microwave it. Yes, microwave it for about 30 seconds to a minute. You don't want to microwave it too long, because if you do that, it'll start breaking down the moss, and that will cause a lot of problems. What you're wanting to do is just simply get the temperature high enough to kill any bacteria that might be living on the moss. Now, for the scissors, what I do, and I've talked about this with cuttings and cutting your dead pictures off, is I sterilize them by taking a lighter and heating up the blade and then dipping it in water and or alcohol once the blade is cooled off, of course, and then you are ready to go. And so what you'll notice is, and this is the tip that somebody I wish would have said, and I'm going to tell you now, make sure that if you're going to put these seeds down, you do it away from an air source, i.e. this fan over here that blew away 10% of my seeds the moment I opened up the pod. Oh well, beginner's unluck, if you will. So make sure that you have the fans pointed away. I'm telling you, the seeds are small. They're meant to blow in the wind, and it certainly did just that. Now, the pods, you won't get all the seeds out, but you can do as much as you can. And what you want to do is simply break them up, the pod, which should already be open when you receive it, over the moss, and you want to get it spread out as thin as possible. That will allow those plants to grow so they're not competing with each other. If they happen to be clustered together, that's perfectly fine. You can move them around. And you want the seeds to rest on top of the moss, not sort of in the nooks and crannies of anything that you missed. And now once you have that there, you want to very, very carefully, with a low amount of pressure, water, spray that on top to sort of press those seeds down into the moss without burying them or splashing them out of your container. Now, it's very, very important that with any Nepenthes, regardless of the age, you want to use pure, inert water. So reverse osmosis water, distilled water. I happen to use water from a dehumidifier that I have that works just fine. I am a little bit nervous, honestly, about growing them like this, because while dehumidifier water is pure, there is a lot more potential for contaminants than there is a reverse osmosis or distilled water, but we will see how that goes. You want to give it a light spraying. The sphagnum moss should be moist, very moist, but not soaking wet. So normally when you would soak your moss, you would squeeze all the water out for your adult Nepenthes. Here you want to keep them a little bit more wet, but not dripping in water. So you don't want standing water. Now what I like about these trays is it's got a little gauge on top. As these plants grow, I can start to open that up. Now, airflow is important with any Nepenthes at any age, but not necessarily as important when you're dealing with seeds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this closed, so there's going to be 100% humidity going on in here for a little bit. And as the plants start to germinate, I'm going to keep opening this up a little bit, giving them a little bit of airflow so that they don't create mold. You want to make sure that no mold it gets on the surface of the sphagnum moss. It's not necessarily a guarantee it'll happen, but if you do have it, just spray it with some pure water and keep an eye on it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and sit this down so I don't have a catastrophe on my hand. Very important also that you label your seeds. Highly important. The last thing you want to do is put down all this effort and time, lose the label. Next thing you know, you have a bunch of beautiful plants, but plants that you cannot identify. So take the time to make yourself a label and label the seeds, especially when you start to get in bulk orders like I'm doing. I would recommend Carnivorous right now if you want to try seeds. Currently, I believe the sale is still going on. They have a 30% off on select seeds right now, and that is why I was able to get a lot of seeds for a very low price. So it's worth the gamble to me, whether or not they grow. Now, I digress a little bit. Let's get back to the seeds. When we're talking about light, Nepenthes seeds, like regular light, just like your normal Nepenthes. So when I say regular light, some seeds, they need a lot of light. Some seeds, they need a little light. Nepenthes will do just fine with whatever light that you give your adult plants. You don't want any light that's too powerful that will dry them out or fry them. You don't want any light that's too low that's going to allow mold to grow. So regular light is just fine. Now, what you're going to notice as these plants start to germinate, it can take as little as 4 to 8 weeks. And fortunately, with some varieties, it can take almost a year. Well, that is very, very rare. 4 to 8 weeks is when you should start seeing little tiny plants. And they don't necessarily produce pitchers right away. They're going to look like regular plants until they start producing very, very tiny microscopic pitchers. And so you don't want to mess with them. Even when they sprout, you want to leave them alone, continue to treat them, keep that moisture high. And so they're going to start to develop over time. Do not separate them, keep them together, even if they're clustered on top of each other. Let them be. And once the pitchers get to a point where they're, I don't know, maybe about this big, you can take a little bit of bloodworm and just feed them in one pitcher to give them a little bit of that extra nutrients that they need. Once they reach a point where you can start putting, let's say, a very, very small Osmocote pellet in it, you can then start to tease them apart and put them in separate pots. Remember, Nepenthes have extremely fine roots, even at adult stage. So my my Caesar and my Brutus, very gigantic, in my terms at least, 2 foot long, foot and a half wide plants have roots that are about just a little bit thicker than a couple of hairs. So when you're talking this small, you're talking almost incomprehensibly small roots that are very easy to break. And so you don't want to do that. So let them grow, let them take their time. Now, to get from a seed to the point where you can start to pull them apart can take almost to 2 years. That's why I said this is not for the faint of heart or anybody that is sort of an immediate gratification. What I recommend in the meantime is do sort of a stair-step process where you go ahead and get your normal size plants, your regular size plants, you get some seedlings going on the side, and then you can also, especially like cross exotics, also offer seedlings that are already developed that you can buy batches of. That way you get sort of different plants at different life cycles, and so you constantly have something to bring you joy and to watch them grow. My fear is that people, if they start off with seeds, they'll become very disenchanted with the whole process because of how long it takes, and then they'll turn away. And then I also don't want the people who grow the adult plants to miss out on the wonderful experience of growing the plants from small ages. Now, again, this is my first time doing seeds, so we're going to go through this experience together. Let's cover a few things. Pure water, pure medium. You want to make sure it's cut down very small on the surface. High humidity. The way I suggest that is, as you saw, in a nice domed tray. That way you can keep humidity in. If you don't have the funds to buy those trays, or you don't have the availability, what you can do is just get a pot. Put those seeds on the pot, just like with the instruction I told you, and then put that pot in a Ziploc bag, and that will do the same thing. And as those plants germinate, just like we talked about in the other videos with bag acclimation, you can start to open those up and ensure that those plants are getting air circulation the older they get. So I'm sure this isn't a comprehensive guide on seeds. I'm sure there's some things I missed. If there is something I missed, and if there's a question you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Please don't hesitate to comment. I'd be happy to share whatever knowledge that I've learned through this process. I am excited about this journey. I'm excited about the other 13 that are coming in that we're going to do a video as well. And we're going to continue to monitor this and continue to watch these grow together, and so that we can experience that journey together. I hope that you have a wonderful day. I hope that you have a wonderful week. And as always, thank you for joining me at CHM Carnivorous. I love the support that you provide, the community that we're building here. And if you do like the content, please like and subscribe. Spread the word. The idea at CHM Carnivorous is to get as many people interested about these plants as we can, so that we can help push them back further away from the brink of extinction. All right, everybody, have a wonderful night. I'll see you soon. So we've reached a pivotal moment in the life cycle of these seedlings. Now, if you'll remember, probably about 3 months ago, I'm just guessing, I bought a bunch of seeds from Carnivorous. Some of those seeds had been around for 6 months, some 2 months, and so I'm going to talk about that and what they look like. But what I specifically want to show today is the hardening off process. Now, this is pivotal when you're growing your seedlings to sort of acclimate them to the environment that they're going to be in long term. So when they start off as seedlings, you want to give them extremely high humidity, almost 100%, and just a little bit of airflow. And as they grow, you want to continue to give them a little bit more airflow and slowly start to acclimate them. They've reached a point in their maturity where I feel that they can withstand the hardening off process. The hardening off process is critical to their long-term success rate. And so without further ado, let's turn the camera around. I'm going to show you a couple things here. First, I'm going to show you what the hardening off process looks like. I'm going to show you some of the pitfalls you need to look for. I'm going to also show you some of the health of the seeds, and show you what you can expect from seeds that might be 6 months old compared to 2 months old, and then also what to look for if your seedlings need a little bit more help as far as nutrients. So let's turn the camera around. So there is a lot to unpack here on this video, but let's go ahead and talk first thing about what your seedlings will look like if they need more fertilizer. Now, we will get, and I will show these off in a minute, but you see how bright green these seedlings are? They are doing very well and are very healthy. Now, if you look over here at these, I'm getting tangled up in my other Nepenthes. See how, oh, if I can get the camera focused, see how yellow and pale those are? That is a good indicator that these will require some fertilization. Now you have to be very, very careful when fertilizing any Nepenthes, but specifically little babies like this. So you want to get some maxi and heavily dilute it just to give them a little bit of a start, and I'm talking very, very little. When they start turning pale like that is a good indicator. Now normally when they're this small, they will feed off of larvae, things like that. They just happen to be in the soil naturally, but that's not always going to be even, and so it's important that you subsidize that with feeding. Now the other thing I want to show you, if I can get it to focus, it's so impossibly small. See how that leaf has got the blacking on the end? That is because it was not ready for the hardening off process. Doesn't mean this seedling's going to die. It just means that it was a little bit shocked by the hardening off process. But let me go ahead and bring over some of the larger ones that I have and talk about them, and then we'll go from there into some of the pitfalls and what to look for when you're starting this process. So this is by far the healthiest tray that I have, and they are growing very nicely in this tray. As you can see here, this one is doing very well. Now again, remember this has been about 3 months, so they take a long time to grow. So you have to have patience when growing these Nepenthes seedlings. By all accounts, this one is doing just perfect. The plants are well fed, as you can see. They are developing quite nice. Now, a lot of the questions I get is, when can you start to separate? My personal opinion is I like to wait until they get a little bit bigger than this, or I say I would like to, this is my first attempt. I'm going to wait until they get a little bit bigger than this, just because their roots are going to be incredibly fine right now. Theoretically, you probably could separate them at this point, especially this one in the middle, and it would do just fine. However, what's the rush? They've got all this room right here to spread their feet, and so I'm going to go ahead and just let them continue to grow and be happy. I've seen growers wait until they get to the point. See, I'm going to pan over here. Hopefully I don't make everybody sick. I've seen growers wait till they get to this size before they start separating them. So it's entirely up to you how you want to do that. I don't see any risk to these plants at all by keeping them in this environment until they get significantly larger than this. Now, if this tray was completely full, that might change my story a little bit, because they will tend to get start to strangle themselves. But in this case, they have plenty of room to move, and they will be just fine. Now, these were some of the 2-month germinated seedlings. The ICPS website says anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months is what's good for you. What we have here is a unhealthy environment for seedlings. Now, the interesting thing is all of these pots have remained at the same level, and all of them have had the same conditions the entire time. None of them have been closer to a humidity source than the other. The crazy thing to talk about, and I've talked about this in other videos, is this was all quote unquote dead sphagnum moss that I bought at the store, and now all of these trays are full of live sphagnum moss. So keep that in mind when you are growing these. Now, the reason why this is unhealthy is, I'll show you. I've showed this in other videos, but I will show you this. Look at all that water coming out of there. Now, the interesting thing to note is I have not filled these trays with any water whatsoever. I do spray occasionally, but it has been a long time since I've done this. Now, the other thing that's interesting to note is I'll have to do this probably once or twice a week, and this tray will be full of water. As you can see right here, I don't know if I can get close enough. See that gelatinous looking stuff? That is mold, slime mold that's growing, and that will kill your plants very quickly. And that comes from it being too wet of an environment. One thing to note about sphagnum moss, especially when it's alive, it's an expert at sponging up the humidity in the atmosphere. So that is something you got to watch very carefully. I don't know why some pots are sponging up more than others, but it just is a thing that's happening. And it is a very important thing to look out for. Now, the seedlings don't seem to mind too much. I'm going to keep an eye on them, of course, because it can have long-term, very poor and deadly effects on them. So I'm going to continue to watch out for that, but it's something to note when you're growing these plants, especially from seedlings, using these trays. One thing you can do is I could drill holes in the bottom of it. I don't really want to do that because I don't want to overreact to it too much and then dry it out. I feel when they're this small, there's a greater risk of them drying out than there is to them getting overwatered. I will continue to keep an eye on it. The other thing that you need to watch out for is if the moss starts to take over. Now, if you use live sphagnum moss, that's something you have to look out for right out of the gate. This is, as you guys know, has been part of this journey. This is the first time that I've ever used or grown seeds from Nepenthes. I had no idea that dead sphagnum moss would come to life like this, and so that's something else to note. If you want to grow sphagnum moss, it looks like you can do it from dead sphagnum moss. I know that's been a topic of contention for a long time. This is proof right here that it will do just that in spades. All right, well, let's move on to the next topic. So in regards to lighting, I use the same light. So I keep them in the same grow tent and use the same light since they were germinating little seedlings as I would as adults. Nepenthes do require a pretty good amount of light in order to germinate and produce seeds. They don't require any sort of cold stratification or anything of that nature, but I wanted to provide them the same light so when they are hardening off, they're only having to deal with the drop in humidity and not the overexposure to light. When they're young like this, their leaves are incredibly fragile. So if you give them too much light, they will burn very quickly. And so I felt like that would be a good game plan, and it seems to have worked very nicely. And so when you're picking your light source, make sure to try to give them as much of what they will have as adults as possible. Somebody who grows these things for a living, seedlings from a living, might have a better take on that, and I welcome the comments and any sort of further direction you can give. The other thing to note, and I'm going to switch gears here, the other thing to note is make sure that when you're putting your seedlings down, that you are pressing them down. So here's a great example of that. This tray has not done well. This was one of the 6-month one, and we've got a couple growing in here, right? But if you look at this one in particular, it's barely in the soil surface, and that is it has hindered its ability to grow. I'm going to try to push it down ever so carefully, but when I was putting these seeds down, I did not do my due diligence 100% of the time and push those down. And so you want to make sure that you are pushing those down and then also spraying them down. And the reason for that is you don't expose those roots. So the reason why this one's not doing so hot could be a number of things, but one hunch that I have is that it has had exposure to those roots, which means those roots are drying out and they don't have as much humidity around the plant. So something to take note. The next thing I want to talk about is I get a lot of things of when can we start to feed these Nepenthes sort of that fertilizer or insects or something like that. When they're this small, they will still continue to get food from fungus gnat larvae, anything like that. When they start to get about this size, you could potentially start to give them very tiny pieces of insect. I would not do any sort of granular fertilizer like an Osmocote yet at that size, but they could probably take that. This size, you definitely want to leave them alone and let nature run its course. There's really no hurry, right? These things have had millions of years to get this figured out, and they will get it figured out. And I promise you, if you look closely, you will see little gnats running around in your sphagnum moss. No matter how hard you have tried to keep them from being in here, they will just find a way. But yeah, that's another question I get is when can you start feeding them? I'm going to let them continue to do their thing and just get it figured out. I will, like I said, potentially provide some very diluted fertilizer to them right there, just to try to get that coloration back, because that one looks like it'll do very well if I give it to them. Any smaller than that, I would be a little bit nervous. Now, if you are going to provide fertilizer to it, make sure you do your research. Make sure you provide caution. Use caution as most importantly, but then try your best, and this is going to be difficult, but try your best not to get it on the moss itself, because you will create a breeding ground for mold, and that will compete with your Nepenthes and will not surely, but has a good likelihood of killing them. So look out for that. All right, everybody. So I want to start with the smallest first and then work my way up. Now, believe it or not, this is 1 year's worth of growth. Now, just like with any other plant, Nepenthes seedlings, all seeds are not created equal. Some species, some hybrids will take longer to grow than others, and sometimes some siblings will take longer than others. I have truncatas that some are 12 inches to 14 inches around that are siblings, with some that are only about 2 inches around. So it all depends on the depends on the environment. It also depends on the plant itself. And so I was going to take this out, but I want to leave it in there. See this one right here? Not all seedlings are going to survive. This got a little too dry, and as a result, I lost some. But there are still some that are growing. Now, they got itty bitty pitchers. I would not feed these at this time. They're going to catch any of the fungus gnats or anything like that, so they should be good to go with that. The biggest thing with these is you just want to make sure that they stay moist enough, and as you can see, if they don't, they will dry out incredibly fast. So definitely watch that. I had this hidden away on some of my truncatas, and so it did not get the care that I wanted it to get, and unfortunately we lost some, but we still have some going. So let's look at the next batch. So here is the next batch. Now, while I don't have the names of them, all of them in these individual batches are siblings. And so this is a perfect example of what I was talking about. You'll see here that we have some that are very, very tiny. That is probably the size of a dime. And then we have others here that are probably the size of a silver dollar. And so they have done very well. I've got out of some of these didn't have a lot of viability with the seeds. I'll tell you about that after I show off the plants. But still, with that, I've got, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plants growing here. We've got one on the side here that I'll probably stand upright. But yep, they're doing just great. At this point, I could very much feed this one just the tiniest bit of food, but honestly, they don't really need it. They'll still catch those fungus gnats and will do just fine. Feeding them, of course, will have them grow faster. You just have to be careful. If you are going to foliar feed them or give them any food at this size, it will be very, very easy to kill them. So you need to be very careful. If you are at all worried about it, I would just let nature take its course and they will get their own food. All right, everybody, so here is the next batch that is growing. And as you can see, these are starting to get some of those details that you want to see. Again, these are siblings. I don't have the tag for them, but you see the reds coming out, and then look at the flared little wings on them there. Absolutely precious. Looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 in there, but they're all clustered together. Now, you could separate these at this point if you wanted to. I'm not. I'm going to let them go ahead and just continue to grow. But this size is a good size where you can separate them. You just have to be extremely, extremely careful. Nepenthes have very, very fragile roots as it is. At this size, they are incredibly fragile. So take your time and make sure you separate them very genteelly, if you will. But overall, these have done very well, and these were all sown the exact same day, and so within minutes apart. So you can tell, depending on the hybrid, and then also just depending on the vigor of whatever you're growing, there can be a huge difference in how they are doing. So here is the final batch that we will show today, and as you can see, they have done very well. These are going to be quite a bit longer, probably some Bachiana in there, but it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plants in there. There could be some under the sphagnum moss, and this brings up a good point. You can start to remove the sphagnum moss. I have not yet, because they are not covering the crowns of the plant. Looks like maybe this one is that I'll need to remove, but for the most part, they are doing just fine. This helps keep them moist and keeps their moisture even, and so they have done very well. And if you've seen my sphagnum moss video, all of this moss was dead, supposedly, and I have not put any live sphagnum moss in there. This is all from sphagnum moss that I bought from Lowe's, believe it or not, the orchid moss, and put it in here, and it is growing like crazy. So they have done very, very well. Now that we've looked at all the plants, let's talk about the conditions that I have them in. Sorry if I'm a little bit sweaty. It is hot in this grow tent. It is probably easily 95 degrees outside, and this tent is, I don't know where my humidistat is, but it's probably in the 80s at least. But anyways, let's talk about the environment I have these plants in. Well, you've heard the humidity, it's about 80%. Now, it's important when you're growing your plants that you want to harden them off. If you keep them under dome too long, then they are going to run the risk of going into shock. I started hardening them off when they got about a dime size for the most part. Some, as you can see, were smaller. And I started hardening them off timeline-wise about 3 months. Now, you can do a little earlier than that. I would say probably stick to the later side of that, but it is important to harden them off so that way they can get a chance to get used to the natural environment. And what I recommend is you can buy these little tiny seedling trays on Amazon that have a little circle on the top with perforations, and you can slowly start to open those circles, and that helps to slowly acclimate them to the environment that you want. And so that's exactly what I did, and I had a lot of success. Now you saw about, I think it was the second tray, that I did lose some, and that's just going to happen, and you're going to have to understand that you will lose these plants along the way, but a really good reputable grower will give you a good supply to start with, and even a single pod can have a ton of seeds in it. So I digress. As far as care and the environment that I have it in, I keep it in the same lighting as I would my grown-up plants, and I have 4 Physeter lights that sit about 4 feet away from the plants. It's about, on the low end, 70 degrees humidity, or degrees, 70% humidity. On the high end, it gets around 85% humidity, but for the most part, it stays within the 70 to 75 range. As far as watering, just like your adult plants, you want to make sure that the soil or the media stays moist at all times. It is very easy, especially if you're growing in these trays, to let the media get too wet. And so you want to make sure that you keep an eye on that, because once they start to rot, they will go extremely fast at that size, and you won't have a lot of time. But that goes for the dry out too. It does not take long for them to dry out. So make sure that you keep them in an area where there's a lot of ambient humidity around larger plants. That has worked for me. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. That has worked for me, and that has been a huge success factor in their longevity and their growth over this prior year. So I'm going to make a dedicated video on buying seeds. That's going to be the next video. And if you've made it this far, I want to give you a little helpful hint. It is very, very important that you know where you're buying your seeds from, for a couple reasons. One is you want to make sure that the plants are not poached. That's one of the biggest things, is you do not want to buy from a reputable site that is selling poached seed pods. The second thing is you want to make sure that you're getting what you're going to get. Time and time again, unfortunately, I see new growers who have been tricked in that they don't know what the seed looks like, and so they buy the seeds thinking they're going to get a carnivorous plant, and it ends up being something totally different. Now I'm going to talk about more of that in my next video, and also where you can buy them. But as a sneak peek, when it comes to Nepenthes seedlings, a great place is Carnivorous. Carnivorous has some really cool hybrids. Some of them can be very pricey, but others are very reasonable in price. But you can also use plant forums, and then also you can use Facebook has a lot of groups that are very reputable where you can get these plants. Be careful with eBay and be careful with Etsy. Not saying they're not reputable growers on there, but really, really do your homework. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you've enjoyed the update on these plants, and maybe I've provided you some insight on what you can expect after a year of growing these plants. Now, the caveats are this: I did not feed these plants. If you do decide to feed them, go with caution, but they can grow faster if you are feeding them, obviously. And so I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't yet, check out the first video and then the 6-month update video, and you can see the whole story coming to life. And I'll be making more of these videos as they grow, and you will have the opportunity to see them from seeds all the way to hopefully larger plants as the future goes on. So, as always, have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.